Good evening, everybody. Hopefully, we're all in the same time zone, so it's evening for everyone. My name is Faya Webb, and welcome to Capital Conversations. My co-host Brianna is here with me. She's a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to monopolize the talking portion of this for the two of us. Um, for those of you who don't know me, I see quite a few new faces that are registered for this webinar. Again, my name is Faya Webb. I started Leaving a Legacy Investments after learning a bit about real estate and getting into syndication deals. I wanted to make it another stream of income for me. So I started a real estate investment company. In my learning journey, I realized how much information I did not have and how late I felt like I was starting with regards to investing. And I just wanted to push those tools out to others so they can get started, a bit of a head start, so to speak. I'm not a trust fund baby. I'm not getting any, I have no legacy wealth. Got to get it on my own. So just trying to push that information out to help somebody else do it a little sooner. Brianna, do you want to try to give a quick intro?
Yeah, we'll see how far I can go. I have a little bit of a cough, so excuse me if I cough in between. So, Brianna Chestnut and I created Soul Investor Co. It's about creating mind and time freedom, essentially. And Fi and I both connected on basically what she just kind of said, right? We're in this learning journey. Neither of us come from money. We come from very humble beginnings. We are trying to find a way forward for ourselves, and we realized we weren't the only ones who needed the education, and we don't want anybody to feel left behind. So we wanted to bring on guest speakers to help educate people and let them know that they're not alone. So that is our goal with Capital Conversations, and we're bringing on amazing speakers as Tina Boyd. And I will let Faya give the intro for Tina, but that's me.
Yes, we do have Tina Boyd tonight, who gets a gold star for empowering women, especially in real estate, through business strategy and strategic lending. She's going to speak a bit tonight about PML, possibly a few other things. I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you run down your resume. But for everyone who is chimed in, it is a conversation. So we welcome questions and things like that along the way. Over to you, Tina.
All right. Thank you for that, Faya. I am so excited to be here. Tonight, we're going to talk about private money lending in real estate, how investors create opportunities without owning the property. Because most people think the only way to participate in real estate is to buy property. And today, we're just going to introduce a new concept. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I have been a private money lender since 2022. And I kind of transition that also into coaching. So I actually coach women on how to be strategic private money lenders. I've been involved in loans up to $1 million in loans, and also different JV deals and equity shares. Also the founder of Women Flipping the Script, which is a national Facebook community of women across the country. We've got over 1,000 women in that Facebook group. I'm also, like I said, the founder of Grit and Polish Coaching, and also founder and CEO of Brixel Technologies. Have the founder of a group where we have created an app for private money lenders to actually track their loans from A to Z once they are booked. And I also coach women one-on-one nationwide in private money lending. So you might ask yourself, what is private money lending? And I try to put this, lay this out in a way that made some sense, especially someone who's never heard of it. At the high level, you are the lender. So you make the decision, and I won't do a deep dive into that, but however where that money comes from. You can fund a loan either through your self-directed IRA. Maybe you've got some business funds. Maybe you're partnered with someone that, like, I have a brother who had some money he wanted to park somewhere. He is not directly in real estate. So we took his money and actually invested it in a deal. And so that money gets loaned to a borrower, which we call an investor. And typically that is secured by property. There are situations where it may not be, depending on your lien position. And a lien position, for those who don't know, is who gets paid first. If you own a house or you've co-signed on a loan or whatnot, it's who gets paid first. So Why would someone utilize a private money lender versus a bank? A bank is going to be much more rigorous, rigid rules, slow to approval. There's going to be low returns. Where you with a private money lender, you're going to get a faster turnaround. You are going to have more flexible terms. We are usually not pulling credit reports, which is why a lot of people go with a private money lender. There's higher returns. I know that looks high. Is it 12 to 18%? But however, some loans are like 6 months with a 3-month extension. So you want to keep in mind that's what we're talking about. This is not like a 30-year loan. Also, as a private money lender, any deals that you are funding, you cannot fund anything that's owner occupied. So the person cannot live in the property. It has to be a property that they're doing like a fix and flip, or they're going to hold it and it's going to be a rental, or they're going to be refining it out into another type of a loan so that you get paid back, and they're going to hold it long term. So that's a basic or the generic version of what private money lending is. Also want you to keep in mind, you are not funding a person. You are funding a deal. What you want to know, what protects my capital? That's the money that you are putting up. Usually that's having a lien position. What happens if things go wrong? These are things, and I share this not to scare you, but this is for you to be prepared. I always tell people, do it scared, but make sure you're prepared. What happens if things go wrong? And what I mean by that is, say, for instance, you've loaned money for 6 months, and they had a bad contractor, and there's some work that has to be reworked, and now the loan is going to be beyond, it was 6 months, now we're going into 10. Let me kind of think about the money that I'm loaning. Can I really have it out that long? These are some things that you need to think about even before you start thinking about sending that money across the wire. How do I get repaid? You get repaid because one of the questions you should be asking your borrower, what is your exit strategy? And the exit strategy is how are we getting, are you going to put it on the market? I'm personally just finished a fix and flip with my brother. We have put it on the market, and how I'm going to pay back my PML, because you'll find that if you're using a self-directed IRA, which I usually use, I cannot loan my own self my money. So I had to get me a private money lender, but that they get repaid, because once the house is sold, they will be repaid out of those proceeds. Keep in mind that this also could be where they're refinancing it because they're going to hold it as a rental. So they're going to refi it out with another company. Maybe it's a hard money lender or some other bank or whatnot. That is how I know that I'm going to get repaid. So these are the basic things that I need to know of how I'm protected. If something were to go wrong, what are my options? And then how do I get repaid? And these are conversations that you need to be having with the borrower before you even decide that you are actually going to fund the loan. And 3 buckets that every lender looks at. We're mentally sorting everything into these 3 buckets that you see here. If all 3 buckets look strong, the deal usually gets funded. If one bucket is weak, the risk goes up. If 2 of them are weak, the deal usually doesn't happen. So I'm going to kind of walk through these quickly of what actually what's in each of these buckets. So the first bucket, we're talking about the property itself. Is the asset solid? So is the house that I'm going to lend on, is it a solid asset? Is the location strong? And I'm not going to do a deep dive, but this is all based on the research that you would do. Where is this house located? Sort of like if you were buying your own house, you're going to look for kind of neighborhood you want to be in. Are the houses appreciating? In that market? What are the days on market that property, that properties are, sitting? Does the zoning support the use? And what I mean by that is there are some people who want to create, maybe tiny homes or a glamping scenario. Does it really support that? Because those are things you're going to want to know before you wire money and find out later that it doesn't support that. The next is the borrower. Do they have experience? We all had to start somewhere. But do they have experience? And if they don't, what are some things that you could do to make you feel more comfortable lending money to someone who's new at this? Maybe you have them partner with someone that you can verify that's going to, shepherd them through the process. Do they have cash in the deal? And that is, I always tell people that is everything's negotiable, but it makes you feel a lot better when you're new that they have some kind of skin in the game. But every PML does not require that. Are they communicating clearly? Understand, if you are doing business with someone, what are your expectations? And I think the biggest one for me is communication, transparency, and integrity, because a lot of times things happen. I don't want someone who's putting their head in the sand and then I'm not hearing from you. There's no calls, there's no emails. And then you start wondering what is going on here. That these are conversations that you're having up front before any money exchanges hands. And then you're going to talk about the structure, the loan to value. How much are you going to loan? When we think about loaning money, and even in my coaching classes, if you're doing something at maybe 70%, so you're loaning 70% of the loan value, probably makes sense because you want a cushion in there that if something were to go wrong, that you're not highly leveraged and potentially could not get your money back. Is there a lien position? Most of the time when you're starting out new, you want to have a lien position. I would never encourage someone who's doing this for the first time going into this in second lien or no lien. There are times that you would do this, but having a lien position, which means if things go awry and something happens and you're first lien, you may have to foreclose on this through the courts and getting the property back. So understanding, and I talked about this a minute ago, the exit strategy or exit plan. How are you going to get your money back? Because anytime someone's talking about an exit strategy, you need to know how you're going to get paid. Next, I'm talking about what makes a deal feel safe. And you just heard me talk about having my little mouse doesn't want to cooperate here. Having skin in the game. What does that look like? I know when I first started out, my very first deal, I covered I loaned on the purchase price and the rehab. And looking back at it now, I probably would have done that a little bit different because I gave all the rehab money up front. I mean, I got my money back, but it was my first one. And it was someone who every payment was late. So keep in mind those kind of things. What are what kind of conversations I need to have when, if the payment is going to be late. I did get my money back, but that was very a taxing time when you're new, trying to figure out if you're actually going to get your money back. We talked about the leverage is conservative, where I was talking about the LTV. Most banks aren't loaning at 85 and 90% of the property. So why would you? Because at the end of the day, as a PML, you are the Bank of America, Chase, ABC Credit Union, what have you. That is who you are at the bank. And usually as the PML, as I tell new PMLs, you are the one who controls that. And we'll talk about a little bit here about legal documents, because all those should originate with you, whether you're working with your, an attorney to actually, put this information together, but making sure that it makes sense. Income projections, are they realistic? A lot of times when you are starting out as a PML, your borrower is going to provide you with comps. Most of us are familiar with comps. If you sold a house yourself, the comps kind of determine, what is this house actually potentially after it's all fixed up, what it's going to look like. But having an understanding of, because a lot of people may ask, where do I get that information? You may work with I always tell people you can call a realtor in that area who will provide you comps, because there's a lot of times a borrower will provide comps and they are apples, oranges, and bananas. And your property is a grape. They don't all go together. So you want to make sure that that the comps actually make sense, because a lot of times you may be presented and someone tells you it's say a 64-cent deal, which means 64 cents of every dollar is what they're paying for the property. However, when you run your numbers, and I always tell people connect with someone who can help you with this. That when you run the numbers, it may wind up being an 80-cent deal because your borrower I never trust that the borrower is going to have all the answers, that it's my money and I need to make sure that I'm actually doing the due diligence and making sure that I'm compliant with what I'm doing in order to make sure that I am protecting my capital. Let's see if it's going to let me advance to the next slide. This little thing drives me nuts sometimes.
Tina, I have two questions for you. One, if I can pull this chat up from Brianna. What other ways or means do you have or can be used for borrowing money for people? You mentioned self-directed IRA.
Mhm.
What other means would people use to personally fund these PML deals?
Well, outside of using a self-directed IRA, like I said, you may have business funds. There's times I've loaned and I may have several loans out at a time, and I can loan the majority of it, all but $2,000. So I will loan $2,000 out of my business account in addition to what I've loaned out of the self-directed IRA, and then also making sure that there's a distinction in your promissory note that $2,000 came from Property Angel Partners, and the other came from the balance came from the self-directed IRA. And like I said, there are people who are not in real estate. I've known some women who have friends who are doctors or whatnot, and they're just like, I'm just looking for some way, got some money, I want to park $100,000. You can work with someone else to, like I did with my brother, and I actually we actually had even though it's family, I always say it's business, that we have a promissory note, a personal guarantee for those funds. And then those funds, I had a promissory note, personal guarantee with the borrower. So I'm responsible for, if this doesn't get paid, I owe my brother the $75,000. So those are some other options that you can do. And one of the things I wanted to share too is a lot of people think you need a lot of money to be a private money lender. Keep in mind that you could have, let's say, $5,000, or $10,000. I'm just going to make these numbers easy. And there's 10 people with $10,000. How much is that? So we've got now $100,000 that everybody can go into a joint venture agreement, all in first lien position. So keep in mind that those are some other ways that you can do it. You may just have like a small savings. When I started, even with my self-directed IRA, I had left a company and I had a 401k there that I did not roll over to the new company. I had a small brokerage account and I had some other funds. That is how I created my self-directed IRA. So those are some other ways that you're able to actually fund that deal. There are people who also will fund a deal using a HELOC. I've done that as well. Is that you can use a HELOC, but you want to make sure that if you're using a HELOC, that you're able to work the numbers to have an understanding of what my monthly payment is on the HELOC based on what it is that I'm getting as a return, on this particular transaction. So those are some ways that you can actually utilize some additional funds to, fund a deal.
And you also mentioned that you loaned on purchase price or you've loaned on the rehab. What's the difference between the two?
The purchase price is what does the house actually cost? And so I'll give you an example here. Like the fix and flip, we purchased in November, but it just went on the market. It was a bank foreclosure. And so we paid, I think I'm a pretty good negotiator. I was able to get it for $88,000. It is on the market for $269,900. So we've put a lot of, probably about $70,000 worth of rehab in there. And what that is the purchase price, covered the $88,000. And then the rest of that loan, because I think the total loan was like $147,000. So we got 88, and then I think but I was bringing money to the table. They didn't require that, but I knew I was going to bring money to the table. And so what they did, which I really do recommend for someone as a PML, is don't drop all the rehab money in the pot at one time, which is how they set it up, which worked out well. That there are draws, and there's we talked through how that, periodically there'd be draws, or if you needed it earlier, I always provided, where we were in the process. They had access to pictures and the Dropbox and whatnot, so that they could see the progress, because there are situations, and I was in one, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, where you funded it, and I was told that the deal was, not the deal, that the property was ready to be ready to be staged. And something in my spirit said, Tina, something's not right. And God said, you need to get in your car and drive over. I'm in Ohio. This house is in Indiana. I go over there. There's 4 feet of water in the basement. They had not been there for 6 or 7 months. And when we went in there, nothing had been done and had the funds almost a year. And so I was in second lien position. There was someone who was in first lien position who didn't even realize that. She was in first lien for $251,000. That's a whole nother story. But this is why I'm saying drop. I would recommend from a rehab standpoint, and the rehab dollars are for the rehab or the holding costs, because a lot of times people don't account for. I need Simply Safe. There's taxes that are probably going to come due while the loan is outstanding. Utilities. So those types of things that you have to make sure actually, that those things actually make, that the money you're utilizing actually makes sense. So this is why I say that, you may want to have someone to have skin in the game. It's not always required. And I can honestly say every loan I've done, I've not always required skin in the game. It just depends what the project is, who I'm working with, and if it makes sense. A lot of variables go into that, their level of expertise or who they're working with. So anyway, hopefully that answered that question.
It did. Just understanding the difference between, specifically the draw process, right? Like if it's for a rehab, you're getting a progress report, so you're loaning money on activities that are actually occurring versus you're just dropping a bunch of money, and like you said, you wind up going there because you have a gut feeling and none of those things have been completed.
Excuse me for coughing there. Exactly. But the rehab is for those dollars, because what can happen, excuse me, is a lot of times you can loan them money. Oh, I got this tickle in my throat. I am so sorry. You may loan all that money up front and the numbers haven't been calculated correctly. And they start using the rehab dollars to pay for holding cost. So they didn't take maybe there's an HOA fee. Maybe there's some kind of grounds maintenance, who knows, but all these things that are due on a monthly basis, the electric, the gas, what have you, that people will wind up utilizing the rehab dollars to pay that and then come back for gap funding, which is what happens when you start running out of money and then you're trying to figure out how am I going to fund the difference. And so when they come back, usually that is what has happened. This is why I say it's important that you have an understanding up front what your numbers actually look like. Does that help?
It does.
There we go. Any other questions? Faya, any other questions?
Nope,
Okay.
no more.
I want to make sure. Next, we're going to talk about a loan box. And you'll hear people talk about their buy box. Normally, if you are an active, what they would call an active investor, these are people who go out and buy the fix and flips and whatnot. But the people who actually loan the money, I coach on something called a loan box. The loan box is sort of like, these are the requirements or the guardrails that are in place in order for me to loan money. Doesn't mean they can't change over time. And that could be a number of things. If you are new, I always want to be in first lien position. I don't plan to loan, more than whatever, let's see, $100,000. You have certain terms and payments that you want to do. Maybe you only want to lend in judicial or versus non-judicial states. And what I mean by that is there are states like I had someone I had to foreclose on. It's in a judicial state, which means it takes months to get through the court system and plenty of money going to an attorney as part of this process, versus a non-judicial state is that I can actually file the paperwork myself with the courts and have the house back in, days or weeks. But those are some things to have in your loan box. What kind of properties do you want to lend on? That you want to do single family homes. There are some people who do multifamily, or maybe you may maybe you want to lend because you are, what's the word I want to say? you believe in what I call passion projects, because there are people who not only rehab properties, but they also they become rentals, but they're rentals for what they call co-living, where you're renting by the room in the house, or some people do sober living. So the housing is for people who are recovering. I have a friend who does student housing in Alabama for the students at Tuskegee University. So you do student housing or doing house or providing housing in underserved communities. So those are things that may be important to you. Those are some things that you could have in your loan box. There's a ton of things, as Faya is aware, that can go into your loan box, but that is just a few things. But these are your requirements, whatever that is. It could be how you want the person to communicate with you. I will always require you to fill out a loan application. Those are the things that you would put in your box that make it okay for you to even consider lending. Next, we'll talk about confidence killers, kind of like what keeps lenders stuck. And I think the biggest thing is fear. And it's usually fear of the unknown. And these are, I've seen people loan money who are new, and 2 weeks later, they're asking for their money back. And it's all because they got scared. I don't think I was going to get my money back or whatnot. And I always tell people this is not an industry for the faint of heart, but it is for people who work hard, who want to understand the ins and outs, understanding what's required from a due diligence standpoint, what's required from a compliance standpoint. But what happens is lack of knowledge. Because I've coached women who shared that, they were winging it out here. And this, I'm like, I was speaking to someone the other week who shared that they have lost their entire retirement because she put all of that money in one deal. I don't coach doing that. Diversify what you're doing until you get your legs up under you and have some level of, that you feel confident in what you're doing. And then the other one is scams, making sure that one of the things I always recommend is that you're doing reference checks. If whoever I'm working with, if I am doing a reference check on you, if you're telling me you've done fix and flips before, what is the address? What states are they located in? I actually go to those states, their county sites, to verify the name of your company is listed there. You want to make sure that who you're working with, you should be loaning money to a business and not an individual. So you want to verify that their LLC actually exists. So you want to ask where's the LLC registered? So if it's in the state of Ohio, they can go to the state of Ohio, the state site here, and verify that my LLC is actually active. Because a lot of times somebody could just tell you, I'm ABC, LLC, and you just run with it, and it's really not a legit business. So these are things I want to make sure that people are staying on top of. And the things that kind of, build your confidence. And I think the biggest thing is investing in education, in whatever manner that is, whether it's a workshop, a masterclass, a mastermind, you're reading books, you're attending local RIAs, you're listening to something like this, that you're educating yourself, understanding what due diligence is required, because this is not something that just, I'm going to do it and it bippity boppity boop and it happens. Understanding what due diligence, what research do I have, if I'm lending money, and I've only loaned one loan in Ohio. I might have been across the country. There's some states that may require you to register your business with that state in order to loan money. So those are things you want to make sure that you have an understanding of. You want to make sure that you understand usury laws, and what usury laws are. What is the maximum amount of interest that I can charge on a loan in that respective state? There are some states that have no usury laws, and then there are some that have usury laws, but there are exceptions to them. Like, for instance, is a loan tied to a mortgage, or is the loan, $250,000 or more? So you want to make sure that you have an understanding and that you are doing that research and that homework. Understanding if you have proper paperwork. Of course, we're always going to have a promissory note. You should be and that's the promise to pay. Everything that should be in there, with the, if there's going to be late fees, if you're going to offer an extension, that promissory note is going to have all of that information in there. And then you should have a personal guarantee. Sometimes, depending on the situation where I had to foreclose on someone, personal guarantee wasn't worth the paper it was on, because she wound up just letting everything go. So there were other PML loans that she had. So there was nothing that we could, that I could recoup any part of the capital. But I still have some people fill out a promissory note, because what the promissory note pretty much, not the promissory note, I'm sorry, your personal guarantee, it's saying that if my business is not able to pay you, you can come after me personally, because they may live in a house that's paid off. So that could be something that you go after, or there's something else that they own, or they have other rental properties that are paid off, or they have equity in them. So those are things you want to make sure that you understand the paperwork you're signing. I see so many people, new and seasoned, who don't understand the paperwork they're signing, understanding the gaps that may not be covering you, but making sure that you're working with an attorney to have an understanding of what that looks like. And then when I talk about community, making sure you're in the right spaces, to making sure you're connecting with like-minded people. That could be your local RIA. It could be a platform like this, or different Facebook groups with regards to real estate, but making sure you are connected with the right folks. And I thought this might be helpful here. I wanted to give you an example, because we've talked about a lot of things, and you're probably like, what exactly is that she's talking about? So I want to walk you through just a simple example of how private money lending, the deal works. And so you'll see here, I've just given it just a basic deal. The purchase price, they're purchasing a property for $100,000, and they're saying the rehab. So that's everything that needs to be fixed in the house. It's $40,000, and then the after repair value. This is the value of what I believe this house is going to sell for, once all these, once we've done all these things. So we move to that middle section where we're talking about the private loan. They've come to me for a $120,000 loan. The interest rate is 12%. We've got 2 points. Points are usually the cost, what we call the cost of doing business. And usually a point is 1% of the loan amount. And then they're talking about they're going to do it for, 8 months. And keep in mind, this can change. And one of the things I always recommend is when you do a loan that you have an extension period in there, because I've been doing this a while and I've only had one loan come back early. All the other loans have been usually have an extension involved, because things happen. You had a bad contractor, you lost money. Now you got to go get gap funding, because now you have to have the electrical redone or what have you. So anyway, being flexible there and extending some level of grace. And so this project is a short-term, it's a fix and flip. They plan to sell it, or they're going to refinance it, and they're going to use the proceeds to repay me. So what you see there at the bottom is the lender or your PML's earnings. So the interest, and I put it in here, $120,000 times that 12% equals, because we're talking about 8 months, and it could be more, could be less if they finish early. But that number divided by 12 months. So right now we're going with 8. So it's $9,600. Those points I talked about, we're talking about $2,400. When we add those together, that total potential return is about $12,000. So I'm going to make about approximately 10% when you annualize that out on my money. So on the right-hand side, we see here the lender protection. You make sure in a situation like this that you have a recorded lien. I always talked about having a lien position, but making sure if the title company is filing that with the courts, you need to make sure that you follow up, because you want to make sure you get a copy of that recorded lien. Making sure when you're running your numbers that there's equity in the property, because you get so leveraged. I had someone the other day in my group, and I pinned her. In the group, I'll pin your opportunities to the feature section of the page. And this one, I just looked at it and I'm like, that can't be right. The purchase price was $100,000. The rehab was 10, and she said the ARV was 150. And then you were looking for a loan at 12 and 3. That is a tight margin. I mean, just thinking at the numbers, it's 100, and then I'm saying that I'm going to sell it for 150, but you still have to pay the PML. It's a very tight margin. These are the things why I'm talking about why it's important to understand how your numbers work. And then at the end of the day, making sure you understand what that exit strategy is, because if they are not able to sell it, what is plan B? It could be that they're going to put a renter in there, and then they're going to make, whatever they're charging, a portion of that may come back to you until you figure out what the, market shift. You may have to do that for a minute. And then once the market changes, you might be able to go ahead and actually sell it. So for me, when I was brand new, these are the lessons I learned. I didn't know to do reference checks. When I first started out, I was excited. You have the stars in your eyes, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm loaning on the purchase price and the rehab." And I did this back in 2022, and it was so funny. This was local. My first loan was in Ohio. That was not planned. It just happened by default. But it was somewhere I could have driven to. I never drove to the property. These are things that I would do now. And I tell people, if you have to jump on a plane and go look at a property, you want to do that, or you want to partner with someone maybe who lives in that state. Even if it's a realtor, and you call and ask them if they would go out there and do a video walkthrough, of the property, because you want to make sure the money that you're lending on is actually on that property. I didn't have a loan box when I started out. So first couple loans, you lending what sounded like it made sense. I now have a loan box. Let excitement blur red flags. The person I loaned to, I was actually looking at purchasing a house from her. She was going through a divorce. I had been divorced for years. And so you feel like is that trauma bonding with each other with regards to, this is, and this is someone who the first payment came when the second payment was due. It was like that the entire cycle, which I can relate to people who get frustrated that they're afraid of lending. But there's things you can do to course correct that. Making sure you're tracking trends and not just transactions. What is going on wherever the property is located? Because what's happening in, Los Angeles, California is going to be different than what's in Iowa. So you need to make sure that you're doing the research to have an understanding what is going on in those neighborhoods. Fund where foreclosures favor, lenders. That's what I was talking about. If you're going to do judicial or non-judicial states, I didn't know that at the time. Keep an eye on the property, not just the promise. Is that you're making sure that you are working with your borrower to get updates, that you're getting photos, that you're having. If you're requiring to have conversations, and these are all the things that you do up front before any money leaves your bank account or your self-directed IRA. And I've talked about don't trust the paper because your numbers may look great, but making sure you're vetting the people that you are looking to lend money with. Even if you are working with, there's a concept called a connector, and a connector is someone who brings in, maybe the PML has hired a connector, or either the borrower. They're looking for you to place you with the other person, and they usually receive some sort of payout. I also tell people, make sure you are vetting connectors, because there are people who are connectors and they're working for someone who's not above board. And I've seen women loan money, and then they're figuring out, I haven't got my money back. I had one lady who wired $20,000. She didn't even look to see, just basically on Google, to even see if the house even existed. And so a number of them had gotten taken by this one lady and this gentleman on the outside, where they had to wind up pulling in legal counsel to get their money back. So this is why I say it's really important that you make sure that you really understand, understand the process. And then common mistakes, jumping into deals before numbers look good. Because on its face, like someone tells you it's a 64-cent deal. Is it really a 64-cent deal? I actually run numbers as if I'm going to buy the property. I don't trust what they say, trust but verify. You can run the numbers. A lot of times they may be correct from a borrower. And then I also run the numbers myself so that I understand that they actually make sense. Let fear or fear of missing out push you into saying yes. There are some people who just I just want to get my first deal and know nothing about private money lending. You are you don't even know if you're, wiring it to the title company. Are you actually wiring it to the title company, or are you wiring it to someone's personal account? You should never wire funds to someone's personal account. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but the best practice is you're wiring it to a title company, or if it's a state where you have to close with an attorney, a closing attorney. Those are the only two scenarios you should be wiring money. I think you do yourself a disservice when you skip education and try to figure it out alone. I see a lot of people doing that, and that's what winds up, because I'm like, it's going to cost you more in the long run when you do something like that. And then also ignoring boundaries. lending outside of your comfort zone because you feel pressured. Or I met her at a local RIA event, and we've done lunch and whatnot. Now I feel obligated because she's now asked me to find a deal. If the deal doesn't make sense and it doesn't feel right, and we have that women's intuition of just like, if I don't feel comfortable, walk away. And don't always believe the marketing hype instead of running the math, because there's a lot of people who, like I said, will tell you it's a 64-cent deal, and you don't run the math and you go through, you've blown the money, and then afterwards, you're running the numbers and find out you're in the 85-cent deal. So you want to make sure that you are doing everything to protect your capital. And then what would make me say yes to a deal? At the end of the day, private money lending it's not about chasing returns. It's about making strategic decisions. And these are some of the biggest things I personally look for before saying yes to a deal. Is there conservative leverage? I want to see enough equity in the property so there's a cushion if something goes wrong. The collateral, the property should make sense as collateral and support the loan amount. Sometimes you may find yourself in a situation and that does not happen. Experienced or prepared borrower. They could be new, but it's very important to me that you're able to articulate your loan from A to Z when I ask questions. Understanding having a reasonable timeline. I've seen people who have a ton of things on their, that need to be done on the house, and they're saying we're going to get it done in 90 days. And I'm like, there's just no way that's going to be done in 90 days. It's probably more like a 6-month project. So having an understanding of what that looks like, because you may be thinking your money's coming back in 90 days and find out that it's actually a 6-month project. Defining the exit. And I've talked about that throughout, understanding the exit strategy, because that is how you get paid back. If they can't articulate the exit strategy, that is not a loan that you do. And then also having an understanding. I had someone one time tell me an exit strategy was lowering the price of the house. And I said, no, that's cutting into your money, and it's also cutting into what, as a PML, what the PML would the part that would go to the private money lender. That is not an exit strategy, but also making sure that there's proper legal documentation in place. So that is the last thing I have, Faya. I have a thing on here that if people want to continue the conversation. For any women, Women Flipping the Script is a Facebook group. If you'd want to join the Facebook group, what I work really hard to do, is important to me that you have solid content in that group. There's a lot of women who find, as PMLs, who find a place to park their money. There's also borrowers there, and there's also women that you can connect with just to learn from, which I think is really a great opportunity. And the Confident Lender Masterclass, we've got one coming up June 13th. If anyone's interested in, and I always tell people I don't twist any arms. I want to understand what your goals are, what your challenges are. Does this make sense, and does this align with where it is that you're going? Sometimes it does, and other times it may not, or may be something that you wish to defer. So anyway, those are the two QR codes, and I just thank you guys for allowing me to be here tonight to share my journey.
Thank you so much, Tina. And I do have a question from the chat, and I actually love this question so much because before doing your Confident Lender Masterclass, I didn't even know this was a thing. Why does judicial versus non-judicial states matter?
It matters because, let me give you an example. This is from my personal walk through this, my painful personal walk. I had loaned on a property, and I was talking about the one in Indiana that had the water in it. I was in second lien position. First lien was in for $251,000, and this lady also. It was like I had a student that was on one of the other properties, and the lady had said, if I got $20,000, we're thinking, well, she got the 20, she can get our properties, moving forward. We did all of that, and what wound up happening is that she wound up walking away, and we found out that she was new, and I had counseled her that you do not want to jump into, you may be running into deals that really make sense, but it's like the bright shiny object syndrome. And what happened is she got into over her head, and we're talking about $1.8 million. Walked away from every one of those $1.8 million in private money lending um, deals. And Indiana is a judicial state, which means I have to go through. It took. I found out that January that when I went over there with the water in the basement and whatnot, it took 8 months to actually get through the process, and I had to hire an attorney. So that is why I talk about a non-judicial state. I can actually go and file with the courts, and I can get the house back within days or weeks, versus a judicial state. I've got to go through that whole process. It's got to go through the sheriff's sale. We go to the sheriff's sale. We wound up getting the house back. The one house we were able to, we're actually, me and someone else, we're actually holding the mortgage. Someone purchased, but we're holding the mortgage. So we're getting, payments each month to help offset what we potentially, lost in that deal. But yes, if you are in a judicial state, you're going to have to, if you have to foreclosure and there's a default, you're going to have to go through the court process. I mean, the long, lengthy court process, versus in a non-judicial state, you do not have to do that.
That's a significant differentiator, like
Yeah,
for the whole
scary.
process, for, mental stability, your sanity, finances, everything. It's a huge difference in what that process looks like.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I said it's so important to have an understanding of who you are dealing with. And I did everything, to dot my I's and, cross your T's and whatnot. And this person, like I said, defaulted on, you didn't know what you didn't know until the default happened. And then we found out who all was on these loans. Some of these other PMLs I actually know. That she defaulted on $1.8 million, and one of the PMLs had loaned her $880,000. And I'm going, like, on 3 houses, I'm like, if one didn't get on the market, I'm trying to figure out how we would fund the other 2. But I'm like, and but for what I understand, I don't know how accurate it is, that she's only been able to recoup, about $400,000 of her money. So
Wow,
those are things to kind of think about. That's a lot of money.
that's
I'm
a
thinking,
lot of money.
I can make back 50 or 75 by doing a fix and flip or something, but I'm like 400. I mean, that is a lot. And we found out that it was someone who wasn't being, truthful with us. And we even, me and the other person who was on the loan with me, we started having, weekly meetings with her. And when she had told us, she said, my son said we should just walk away from the property I'm on. And I'm just sitting here going, like, I can't, you're just sitting there in awe.
Yeah.
Because we asked to do like a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Instead of going foreclosure, you can ask them to sign the deed over, and you figure out what you need to do next. They refused to do that. They only wanted to do it if we got rid of the personal guarantee, which is why we assumed they had something. And at the time, but her son wound up passing away, and she wound up just losing everything, and almost living off the grid. So there was nothing to
Wow.
even go after. So this is why I say it's very important to have an understanding, not only who you're working with, but when you're on a loan, making sure you know who you're in bed with from a business standpoint of who's on the loan. Because the person who was in first lien on the one property, I was the one who recognized and went over, took the videos, pictures, looked her up, and told her what was going on. She had never been to the property, but what wound up happening is it became I'm in first lien, so I call all the shots. So you wound up somebody not wanting to work with you, where I'm like, I'm here, and could have created a win-win scenario for the both of us, maybe putting some more money into the house, because it was at the edge of a university, and it was a nice Victorian house that, we could have fixed up and maybe put students or something in there until you recouped your funds, or could have sold it. And she didn't want to do that. And then what wound up happening is that she wound up deciding to foreclose on it. I didn't find out till I got something in the mail that she decided to foreclose, which eliminated my second. So we did not, we didn't know until, and then she asked me, I know you had said if I drop the price a little bit, you might be interested in purchasing it because that just happened in March. And I said, I've moved on. It is what it is, and I have to move away from that. And but she wound up getting the property back because it did not sell at the sheriff's sale. And I tried to tell her, I've been here physically and seen it. It is not worth what you're putting it on the market for. It's not even worth at the time, I think the ARV on it was like four something. It wasn't even $100,000 condition.
Wow.
And also the person in first lien, this is why I said it's important to know who you are in bed with from a business standpoint. She continued putting money into the property, even though it was in default. I'm like, our names are not on here. I mean, I'm the lien holder, but you don't own the property. The lady still owns the property, and she put in, I think when it ended, she was a little over $300,000 into this property, and there was no toilets, no tub, no running water. Because I went and saw the house twice, and then she allowed the borrower to move in the house because the borrower said she didn't have anywhere to go. And when I went to visit, dogs were running around, relieving themselves on the floor. It was just, I had never seen anything like it I'm just like, this is absolutely insane. So I
Sounds
say
like
that
it.
as a cautionary tale of what not to do.
Well, thank you so much. I will say, for anyone who is interested, the Confident Lender Masterclass was great for me. Like, I can't overstate how valuable it was. There are so many things. I guess my mindset was, as someone who has purchased homes before, someone who's gone into syndication deals, I have a good enough knowledge about how a loan should work, right? But there are so many intricacies when you are doing private money lending that I would not know to look for without this class as the foundation. The documentation, you talk about sometimes you don't want to like scare someone away, like asking for things, but then you hear horror stories like this and you understand the necessity of proper documentation, of running the checks that you need to check, of someone having, boots on the ground and eyes on the property. So it's just, it's been vastly significant to me, just like to open my eyes to what the process is and how significant these steps are in just making sure you have, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed before you go into it. So you don't, learn a lot of super hard and costly lessons while you're starting out and trying to find your way. Also, there are a lot of valuable resources that I got from the masterclass. In the next month or two, Larissa Green should be a guest speaker on self-directed IRAs, and I was introduced to her through the master class. She's with Advanta IRA. She's another very great resource. So yeah, it was just worth more than the price for sure.
Wonderful. When I hit stop share on my end. Yeah, good.
So yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
yes,
This
I'm
was
super
good
excited.
because it's just so. I always tell people the tools and whatnot that have been created are things I wish existed when I started. There was
Hmm.
nothing. I used to be a member of if anybody's familiar with the Women's Real Estate Investment Network, I did that, but there were so many different ways that that you could get into real estate, and I thought I wanted to be a wholesaler because they were like, oh, you can make. I'm like, that's a whole lot of cold. This is like sales calls. I'm like, do you want to buy windows? I'm like, no, I can't do that. So it's just like, I don't want to do that. And then wound up in private money lending, but created the tools that FIRE refers to. Came from things that didn't exist when I created the things as they came along that this needs to exist, which is how it wound up growing into a coaching program. So, but thank you for those nice sentiments.
You're welcome. Very well deserved. And it's also the foundation of this whole capital conversations is to do exactly that. As we learn, as we find resources, as we find tools, we're pushing them out to other people. So, they can learn from our mistakes, learn from our successes,
Mhm.
and have resources that we may not have had when we started out. So If you guys have no more questions, we can wrap it up. We are about at time. This, as well as all other episodes, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We'll send you a link to that once it's uploaded. Thank you so much for participating. Brianna, you have any closing remarks?
I just want to say thank you so much. I learned a lot, obviously.
Good.
I didn't know much about private money lending. Did not know anything. I guess I've heard of the judicial versus non-judicial, right? But I didn't know the importance of it. But thank you so much. It was so great to have you on.
Thank you. I was glad to be here. So glad to be here. Thank you guys for this.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening and see you next time on Capital Conversations.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a good one. Bye.